Hello, this is Off Leash with Eric Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Ukraine conducted a massive and impactful attack deep inside of Russia with drones, drone technology. And we're going to explore it here and break it down with Eric's expert insights as usual here on Off Leash. Eric, let me go through some of the details of this attack that took place. And I want to get your insights first on the technology that was leveraged and the strategy that Ukraine used. So this attack was on June 1st, 2025. It was dubbed the Spider's Web drone attack. And this was 4,000 kilometers inside of Russian territory, striking Russian air bases in Irkutsk and Murmansk, damaging up to 41 nuclear-capable bombers. According to reports, Eric, this was a plan that was executed over an 18-month period, a planned operation, which smuggled into Russia 117 small FPV drones in wooden containers hidden in trucks. So this was carefully planned. Ukraine was able to demonstrate tremendous vulnerabilities on the part of the Russians, not just from the attack itself, but from smuggling in these drones. And what strikes me as very interesting, they were managed and controlled locally near the strike sites. So, Eric, let's go into the tactical approach, the strategy here, the technology that was used.
This was truly a masterful stroke, a true unconventional asymmetric capability that they demonstrated. And from start to finish, this is a very hard thing to accomplish. You're right. The logistics of getting the drones that are armed with the batteries charged inside the country, first, getting them into containers that could house them with a remote control. And again, so you have battery life in the drones. How do they keep those fresh and charged? Perhaps a safe house, perhaps a place that they could be armed and prepared inside of Russia. And getting, I would say, dupe drivers, Russian drivers that were told to apparently to drive near to the facilities where these guys could launch from, and then having enough wherewithal to command those drones while they're launched, to get them launched, and to guide them to whatever their objective was in an area of very high anti-aircraft defenses, jammers, etc. It was an impressive feat to pull off, and it's. I think we'll be feeling repercussions of that raid for decades. That's the level of significance of it.
So tell us about these FPV drones. What size are they? What sort of range do they have? What sort of payload are they carrying?
Those would typically have a 7 or a 10-inch rotor blade. An FPV drone stands for first person viewer. And so the operator is literally wearing goggles. So you're looking through and seeing exactly what the little camera on the front of the drone has. They would be carrying probably a 5 up to a 6 pound charge for short range. The maximum range on those would be out to around 15 kilometers. But as you saw from any captured footage, those drones were launching from those trucks, which were parked effectively right next to the end of an airfield. So it doesn't look like they had to fly more than 2, maybe 3 miles to get onto their objective. Those are made from, incidentally, the FPV, those are literally derived from a recreational drone used for racing or for recreation or for wedding photographers or whatever, to have overhead view. And they fly approach speed of about 70, maximum 80 miles an hour. Battery life is going to be 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on what kind of payload you have on it. And so they had to do those quick. I would imagine they probably use local Russian SIM cards inserted in there to control those remotely. I doubt they were using some kind of RF, a regular radio.
So that's fascinating. if there were, let's say reports are correct, there were 117 of these drones. How many at one time can an operator manage and control? Or are they in sequence, one after the other?
The video captured seemed like they were in sequence. It doesn't look like they ever did a swarm attack. And apparently, I also read, unconfirmed, that the Ukrainians used aircraft that were in a museum to scan it, to load that image onto the drone itself. So there was a bit of an AI processing on the edge so that it would recognize its target and drive itself into it without any input from the operator. If you watch that footage of the FPV attacking the aircraft, you can see tires stacked on the wings of those aircraft, ostensibly to try to give it some kind of protection from an FPV drone coming and hitting it. I think it's also important to note that the aircraft that were attacked were the Bear bombers, which is a 4-engine prop aircraft, big turboprop, very long range. That's designed to fly from Murmansk up in northern Russia all the way to Cuba as an anti-submarine aircraft or as a very long-range bomber. And there was also the Tupolev 22. They did not hit specifically the Tupolev 160, which is the main nuclear deterrent aircraft of the Russian Air Force. The Tupolev 95s, the old Bear bomber, are very strong, big payload, and that's what was carrying the effectively the hypersonic missiles that were used to smash a lot of targets inside of Ukraine.
So this was a dastardly attack. It took 18 months to properly plan it and carefully stage it. But it must have had a tremendous impact on the morale of the Ukrainian people and the armed forces. I'm sure it bolsters Zelensky to some degree. It looks like a real egg on the face for Putin. And I can only imagine what kind of response this is going to draw. But, how bad, is this for Putin? How bad of an attack is this for him?
All the aircraft that were hit, like I said, those bombers, and also something called an A-50, which is built on an IL-76 cargo plane. It's got the big radome on top of it. That's their airborne command and control radar aircraft. All of those aircraft described, none of them are in production, nor have been in production for probably 25 to 30 years. So they can't replace them without completely restarting a factory line. And nor are there even really that many parts to fix that many of the damaged aircraft. So this is a huge blow to the readiness of the heavy delivery capability of the Russian Air Force, and especially losing their command and control. The other thing that was attacked was the Murmansk naval base, which is headquarters of the Northern Fleet. And there was reports of explosions there, but don't know if any of the Russian submarines, most of them carrying nuclear missiles, were actually struck. If so, that is another massive escalatory move by the Ukrainians, and I seriously doubt that they had any kind of pre-coordination or knowledge passed to the U.S. that they were doing this. We talked about the containers that these came off of. They look like they used a modular mobile home that you'd put on the back of a trailer with some kind of retractable roof or what looked like solar panels. Those solar panels were not solar. They were able to tip up, revealing the compartment where the FPV drones were then launched. So it was brilliant. They got Russian truck drivers unknowingly to drive to those parking lots, park and wait to be met by someone, not knowing that they were carrying the deadly method to attack these Russian Air Force bases. So again, they struck targets fairly near to Ukraine. And the farthest one was deep inside, all the way out by the Kazakhstan border, and all the way up on the northern edge of Russia in Murmansk. It was brilliantly done, and to do it simultaneous, it makes it that much more difficult. So they managed to thread the needle on this. It will have significant repercussions on the defensive footing of Russia, because now they have to defend everywhere and not just at their periphery. It's important to remember, as mixed effectiveness as the bombing campaign of the Allies was inside Germany during World War II, it forced the Germans to keep a lot of security personnel all over Germany and lots of guns pointed up at the sky. This will cause a lot of air defenses to be retasked to defend bases, and it also points to the importance of actual shelters for all these aircraft. The Russian bombers were out there as part of some START treaty so that they could be visually counted and verified from space by the U.S. To prevent some kind of secret escalation. So that, I'm sure the Russians will be rethinking that right now, which affects Americans' safety and security. And I would imagine they're going to put a lot of their aircraft in shelters. It speaks to the extreme vulnerability of American assets, ships, aircraft parked along ramps, anywhere in the country. The fact that any operatives could move FPV drones in, weaponize them with effectively a beer can sized charge, drive it into these jets, and take out huge chunks of American air power or American sea power in a matter of minutes. We speak about the changing nature of warfare. We've covered it on previous episodes. This is the absolute most brazen case of that. And I would say the next black swan events people should think about is the amount of vulnerable politicians, whether they're speaking outside, moving outside, driving outside, everyone is vulnerable to this kind of attack.
Yeah, it's interesting learning about the START implications here because, of course, the START talks began, under Reagan with his talks with Gorbachev. The latest iteration of the START treaty was in 2010, and it basically limits the U.S. and Russia to 1,550 nuclear warheads each and 700 delivery systems. And like you said, these bombers, being in compliance with the treaty, they have to be out and exposed so satellites can view them, just like we do on this end. Do you see implications for the U.S. and Russia and the START treaty and the way that we are managing, our nuclear stockpile in agreement with Russia? What do you see happening there based on this attack?
I can't see how it doesn't change both countries' postures on this. I mean, the fact that a B-2 bomber, I think this attack, I think I saw a report that it cost the Russian state about $7 billion worth of aircraft. Well, one B-2 is already valued at $900 million apiece. So it would not take long to damage. And again, all of the U.S. bomber fleet, nothing is in production. So any damage to those aircraft from any terrorism or any insurgent type attack or asymmetric attack from a nation state is effectively an irreplaceable loss for us.
So after this attack, President Trump had a lengthy phone call with President Putin. Let's just speculate for a moment. What do you think that phone call was like?
It did not go well, is what I heard.
So
I can only imagine how angry Putin was on this. I think both sides at this point have to be looking for an off ramp, and I would imagine Zelensky sees those negotiations coming to more pressure from Trump, and I guess he figured he had to get this one last shot in to try to improve his position. And I'm not sure it's going to, or if it's just going to guarantee a bigger rage response. And as you saw, a lot of Russian missiles and drones raining down on Ukrainian cities and targets all through the country, because there's certainly consequences when you take that kind of shot into a country that has those kind of capabilities. Because Russia has not responded with nukes, and we should all be very thankful for that.
Yeah, well, look, this attack occurred on the eve of the next scheduled talks, which were on the calendar June 2nd in Istanbul. Yeah, the day before. And that meeting actually took place, but I think it lasted for an hour. There was some agreement on exchanging a prisoner swap, but I can only imagine what that call was like you said. And, what I don't like about this whole thing, Eric, is President Trump has been managing this war, or at least the process to get to a negotiated settlement, as effectively, I think, as anybody could. Certainly by leagues ahead of Joe Biden ever did, because none of the sides were talking under Joe Biden. I don't like what Zelensky did to Donald Trump here. Clearly, the president didn't get a warning. He wasn't consulted about this attack. Not a big surprise there, but it puts Donald Trump into a horrible position, and it seems to me as if he's going to have to put a tremendous amount of pressure on Zelensky now to accept whatever the hell terms need to be accepted to reach a ceasefire. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with that assumption, or that the assertion. I think the fact that Trump was not consulted, and I don't believe he was, because he never would have concurred with it. I think it puts Trump in a very much more of a neutral position, and so I even heard him make rumblings of sanctioning both sides, not just the Russians, but the Ukrainians, if they don't come to some understanding here soon. I think that's a good idea, because again, all Ukraine is doing is burning up more and more generations of men. When you have to forcibly press gang, arrest, drag young men off the streets to take them off to war, that is not a healthy sign for a society. Time to wrap it up.
There is conversation that the next round of talks could take place as early as June 20th. I know that Ukraine has agreed to that date. Russia has not yet agreed to that date. You got to believe that those talks could take place on the 20th, but before then, got to believe we're going to see a massive response from Russia militarily following this attack on June 1st.
Here's the thing. It's now dry season. We're coming up on the first few days of July, which is the anniversary of the largest tank battle in history, the Battle of Kursk. 8,000 tanks, 5,000 versus 3,000 tanks back in World War II. When those fields are dry, it's a lot more possible for Russian armor and Russian forces to maneuver and to mass assaults. And the lines for Ukraine are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. They're way behind on demographic replacement. They can't field enough soldiers. And so the longer they go, the worse their chances of surviving as a country get. So again, the fact that it's dry season, it's not wet anymore, means that the likelihood of a big setback grows higher and higher.
Before this attack, if I recall properly, as we were moving towards ceasefire negotiations, real ceasefire negotiations, it was actually Putin who was pushing the envelope. It seemed as if he was trying to expand his reach as far as he possibly could before heading into those negotiations. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, the Russians continue to attack on multiple fronts and just kind of grind away like a rototiller. And they, whether it's 10 meters a day, 100 meters a day, or a kilometer a week, they continue to take more territory and kill more Ukrainians every day. I hope there's a ceasefire agreed to. I hope they can have an election, and that a legitimate constitutional representative of the Ukrainian state can be there that can actually negotiate with Russia as a counterparty and bring this thing to an end soon.
So let's exit on this, Eric, on this topic. What would your advice to President Trump be at this stage of the game? How do we get this thing wrapped up? How do we get this war ended as soon as possible based on these developments?
It is in the interest of the United States to pull Russia away from an orbit with China. The sooner he can do that, by whatever diplomatic, economic pressure means, our border security, our territorial integrity is far more important than Ukraine's territorial integrity. And so the economic means that he's talked about as pressure. And I would, a cutoff of U.S. funds and weaponry will have a significant effect on the possibilities or the decision making of the Ukrainian government.
One other thing occurs to me, Eric, which is what we've seen in 3 years of war here in Ukraine is the evolution of warfare and warfighting technology. This is just yet another chapter in that book. Would you agree?
Yeah, but applying those lessons learned of using kids racing drones, weaponized on the front to take out tanks, that's one thing. To take out your opponent's key strategic bombers thousands of miles inside his country through a false flag, effectively a Trojan horse operation, brilliant, historic, and will be affecting battlefields and be studied in military history for decades or centuries to come.
Well said. Well, as usual, we get insights you're not going to get anywhere else, especially regarding this historic Ukrainian drone attack deep inside of Russia, right here on Off Leash. We appreciate you being with us. Don't forget to go to unplug.com/offleash for your unplugged phone today. We appreciate it as always. This is Off Leash with Eric Prince. I'm Mark Serrano.